Let's begin with a story. The grandfather had become very old. His legs would not carry him, his eyes could not see, his ears could not hear, and he was toothless. When he ate, bits of food sometimes dropped out of his mouth. His son and his son's wife no longer allowed him to eat with them at the table. He had to eat his meals in the corner near the stove. One day they gave him food in his bowl. He tried to move the bowl closer. It fell to the floor and broke. His daughter-in-law scolded him. She told him that he spoiled everything in the house and broke their dishes, and she said that from now on he would get his food in a wooden dish. The old man sighed, but said nothing. A few days later, the old man's son and wife were sitting in their hut, resting and watching their little boy playing on the floor. They saw him putting together something out of small pieces of wood. His father asked him, "What are you making, son?" The little grandson said, "I'm making a wooden bucket. When you and Mama get old, I'll feed you out of this wooden bucket." The young peasant and his wife looked at each other, and tears filled their eyes. They were ashamed because they had treated the old grandfather so meanly, and from that day on, they let the old man eat with them at the table and took much better care of him. This story, The Old Grandfather and His Little Grandson, was actually written by the great Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy. It is, however, a tale that has appeared in the literature of many cultures, and like all universal stories, one truth is that we humans learn primarily from example. One truth captured by Tolstoy's story concerns the virtue of respect. The frustrated daughter-in-law lost sight of the old man's humanity. It was not until she and her husband were shamed by their little son's actions that they realized the profound disrespect with which they had treated the old gentleman. This story, then, is one of loss and recovery of respect. A root meaning of the word respect is to give something or someone particular attention or consideration. To respect another human being is to acknowledge and give consideration to the fact of his or her personhood. Respect transcends our feelings of liking or disliking a person and helps us to acknowledge his or her essential dignity and worth. It may not be an overstatement to say that the virtue of respect is the habit of recognizing the intrinsic value of the other, which is at the very core of civilized life. Without respect, families, communities, and nations cannot hold together. Lack of respect can be described as the disregard or failure to acknowledge the fundamental worth of the other. It can range from self-absorption and indifference to outright contempt for the other person. Disrespect is not confined to how we treat others. A person with low self-esteem who habitually neglects his own welfare lacks self-respect. And those who have no regard for the knowledge or who pollute our environment can be faulted for their own disrespect. The virtue of respect, however, requires two things of us: understanding and action. We must come to the realization that the other is like us in that she or he has feelings, desires, and needs. He or she also has fundamental human dignity and worth. Full development as a person is characterized by a deep understanding of our shared humanity. And while that understanding is essential, respect needs to be operational. Respect needs action. For example, in the story, The Old Grandfather and His Little Grandson, the boy's parents not only had to recognize the humanity of the old man, but they also needed to act. Without deeds, their respect would be empty. Essential to every virtue is the ready disposition to choose and act well. Respect helps us to flourish, both individually and collectively. It helps us to overcome biases and prejudices. It actually calls our selfishness into check. Respect helps us to attend to others, to listen and learn from them, to recognize their intrinsic value. Respect calls forth the best in us and challenges us to regard others as we would like them to regard us. Respect is the virtue that enables us to create and sustain a harmonious family life, to build healthy relationships, to be better friends, colleagues, mentors, and citizens. Without respect, relationships disintegrate into mere contractual agreements. Employees are instrumentalized, and friends descend into just mere objects of pleasure. Thought leader Kevin Ryan states that respect needs to be an animating principle in our lives if we are to be happy and contribute to a culture of peace, a culture based on respectful dialogue, mutual support, care for those in need, and a responsible stewardship of our natural resources. Starting in childhood, we come to learn the fundamentals of respect. We learn respect for elders, for the law, for truth, for others, especially those who are different from us. Respect is what we are invoking when we teach children to take turns, to play fair. It is what we aim to instill in children so that they will not taunt, ridicule, swear at, or bully another child. Respect is the reason that we teach manners and common courtesy, even though the manifestation of these manners may vary from culture to culture. Thought leader Kevin Ryan posits that when there is respect, we flourish. We live happier lives when both adults and children treat others with respect. Some fortunate children and adults have a model of respect in their own family, in their neighborhood, or even in the workplace. That role model's presence and behavior is a continual reminder of how we should honor the intrinsic value of others, a daily reminder of how a respectful person behaves. Their good behavior may even rub off on us. But because the opposite can also be true, committed parents carefully monitor who their children associate with. The disrespectful behavior of other children can also seep into a child's thoughts and actions. Some children, unfortunately, do not learn the fundamentals of respect at home or in their communities, and they arrive at school prepared to fight, reflecting the attitudes and behaviors they've absorbed. For parents and teachers, there are strategies that may help in teaching the virtue of respect. First of all, it's important to stay calm, not to overreact when you think a child is being disrespectful. Next, to identify the cause for disrespect and focus on teaching problem-solving alternatives. Thirdly, it's important to model being respectful. You need to respect the children in your care. Next, use kind but firm discipline to teach, not to punish. We need to give respect to earn respect. And finally, it is really critical to apologize when you are disrespectful. In addition, remember that we are not limited to flesh and blood models of respect. Stories, whether true or fictional, present models of respect in action. One of the strongest justifications for the reading of literature and history is that it has the potential to ignite our moral imagination. Through stories, children and adults encounter people like ourselves, struggling to behave with respect, even in times of great challenge. However, one of the harsh realities of our modern world is that we are inundated with stories. Now we have books, television, movies, etc., that provide endless access to illustrations of the human story. The problem we face is the volume of stories to which we are exposed. It can keep us from noticing and thinking about the moral message behind each. We can and should combat this with the practice of reflection. People with the habit of reflection, continually probing meaning and seeking ways to improve their lives, are the ones who are headed in the right direction. There is a professor who teaches his students the virtue of respect by showing his students the movie Groundhog Day. If you remember, the plot involves one of my favorites, Bill Murray, as a man who is completely selfish, with little or no respect for those around him. However, he becomes entrapped in one particular day, Groundhog Day, and keeps having to relive the day over and over, meeting the same people, encountering the same events, and unsuccessfully pursuing the same woman. Through many, many repetitions of Groundhog Day, he gradually confronts his lack of respect for others and begins his path towards virtue and happiness. Many of us have seen this film, maybe over and over in the early February of each year, and while we laughed and enjoyed Bill Murray's antics, we may have missed the deeper meaning of this popular movie. It's a film that can not only teach about the virtue of respect, but can also illustrate the value of cultivating the habit of reflecting on our everyday choices and actions. To bring out the best from their teams, authentic leaders need to develop trusting relationships based on mutual respect. There is really no substitute. Respect provides a basis for empowerment, but leaders need to earn it. Some things that empowering leaders can do to gain the respect of those they lead include those that are listed on this slide. For example, treating others as equals. We respect people who treat us as equals, especially those in leadership positions. By showing genuine respect and being authentic in interactions, leaders can empower the people in their care to also lead in their own authentic way. Next, listening actively. We are grateful when people genuinely listen to us. Active listening is one of the most important abilities of empowering leaders because people sense that such individuals are genuinely interested in them and not just trying to get something from them. Next, learning from people. We feel respected when others believe they can learn from us or even ask our advice. We need to be open to learning from our students as well as our colleagues. I know that I learn a great deal from my North Central candidates, and their feedback helps me to understand how aspiring leaders are thinking. Next, sharing life stories. When leaders are willing to be open and share personal stories and vulnerabilities appropriately, people feel empowered to share their own stories and uncertainties in return. Finally, the importance of being aligned around the mission. The most empowering condition of all is when an entire organization is aligned with its mission. People's passions and purposes synchronize with each other. Individuals usually have their own passions that drive them, but if the leader can demonstrate how those in his or her care can fulfill their purpose while also achieving the organization's mission, alignment occurs. Authentic leaders empower others to use their gifts and step up to leadership, regardless of their titles or roles within the organization. Finally, as with all virtues that we wish to possess or strengthen, we need to consciously practice respect. To build our virtue of respect, we can give attention to those that we may have previously ignored. We can listen carefully to understand and appreciate those we don't normally take seriously. We can ask for clarification and seek all sides of a story before drawing conclusions. We can fight our preoccupations with self by being attentive to the needs of others. We can practice courtesy in our words, our tone of voice, and our gestures. We can be punctual and respectful of people's time. We can be positive in the way we speak about people. We can be mindful that our words can tear down a person's reputation or esteem. And we can be thorough in our work out of respect for those we serve and those we work for. While all of this may seem artificial and perhaps even daunting, practice can make a difference. With practice and habituation, we notice that others have more to offer than we thought. We notice that there are human satisfactions in being respectful to others. Eventually, respect can become a natural habit. It can become simply the way we respond to those around us.